No time to waste. It's Q&A Thursday. Let's get into it. Our 3 questions today. How do you change for the better when everything feels like it blows up in my face? I feel like I've tried everything, nothing works. I haven't seen my kids in 2 years. I'm sad all the time. How do I stop living like this? And the last one, I've heard you talk about meditation. How do I stop my thoughts from racing? This is what we dive into today. Welcome to the R.Y.S.E Movement Podcast, a place where men just like you learn to raise your standards everywhere. Welcome to another episode of the R.Y.S.E Movement Podcast. I'm Dave, and today we've got Q&A Thursday. Like I said, no time to waste. Let's jump straight into it. We've got 3 questions to go through today, and 2 of them pretty heavy. So a lot of the content around the R.Y.S.E Movement Podcast and what I've been putting up on socials for the last couple of weeks has been based on men's experience with domestic violence. I've got a video that's doing well on TikTok. Again, I'll link it down in the description below so that you can go and watch it for yourself. The video is talking about my experience with DV. The heaviness of today's topics, today's questions, come from people that have asked me specifically, what do I do in this scenario? The heaviness, the weight of what we talk about matters because I've had 2,000 comments, 100 DMs, so many conversations, and a couple of men have decided to come on board as coaching clients to be able to create a life of success, love, and fulfillment, which is what we're all about. That's what raising your standards means. So let's get into it. It's going to be heavy. There's going to be a lot that we're going to unpack here, but it's necessary. If you have anyone that you know that goes through domestic violence, whether it's man or woman, please make sure you reach out and get help. If it's a bloke, please advise him to record conversations, keep text messages, screenshots, or create evidence to be able to provide safety. The same thing goes for any females that are around, and also welfare checks with the police are an amazing tool to be able to just get someone the help that they need if they won't talk about it. With that said, let's get into it. So question number 1, how do you change for the better when it feels like everything blows up in my face? This is a big one. Okay, so how do you change for the better when everything feels like it blows up in your face? That question there is the analogy that I like to use is you doing a burnout in an automatic rear-wheel drive car. To do a burnout in a rear-wheel drive automatic car, all you need to do is lightly apply the brake so that there's enough force to stop the car from rolling forward and mash the accelerator. That's what this question here is doing. And that's what a lot of guys do with their life. They have an idea, a rough estimate of what they want to do in the future. However, they're holding themselves back by negative emotions, negative thinking, self-sabotage, victimhood, whatever it is. There's a bunch of things that's going wrong here. Essentially, what you guys are doing when you're in this place, and I've been in this place too, is your foot's on the gas and the brake at the same time. When this happens, you've got all this animosity, all this excitable energy inside of you that is potential energy, but it's being held back by belief systems, values, any negative thoughts and emotions, like I said. You need to get out of your way is what you need to do. And I say this knowing full well how fucking hard that is to do. Getting out of your way is one of the most challenging things you can do because it's a protection mechanism. Your mind is literally trying to hold you back to stop you from going through any more pain. It's understanding that the road ahead is going to be rocky, it's going to be twists and turns, it's going to be arduous, it's going to be some of the hardest things you ever do. And the way that our minds are geared up is for safety and security, protection. It's to be aware of all the things that could go wrong because we've been through a place of whether it's fear, whether it's abuse, violence, alcoholism, any other addictions. Like our mind is trying to protect ourselves by holding us still in this place. If not, by sheltering us from what could go wrong. So the reason why we put our foot on the brake and the accelerator at the same time is because there's a part of us that's always hopeful, no matter how dark things got. If I was to tell you guys the extent of what I told my psychiatrist for my ADHD diagnosis on Monday versus what I actually share on the podcast, you'd be fucking horrified at what I've been through in my life, as many of other guys have been through themselves. When you accept, move forward, integrate, heal, and you start on this path of moving forward by holding yourself to account, working with a professional to be able to make sure your emotions and trauma and all these sorts of things are wrapped up and integrated so that you don't have to hold yourself back anymore, hold yourself in protection anymore, you become free. That's my biggest piece here is go get some help. It's not weak to speak, and speak to someone who can do something about it. I've spoken many times about it's great to go catch up with a mate for a beer. It's great to be able to talk to a friend, but they don't have the tools and resources and years and years of study and application with other people to be able to help offer advice. For all intents and purposes, their relationships and lives are probably just as fucked up as yours, if not maybe more. Especially like there's this archetype. We talk about archetypes a lot. There's this archetype of Asclepius. Asclepius was the god of healing. And Asclepius was always injured. He was always sick, and he was constantly remedying the problems and the illnesses of himself. That's why he became a god, because he was continually just in this perpetual motion. It's also the archetype of the wounded healer. How many spiritual people do you know that boast about breath work and meditation and all these different things, and they feel the energies and they've got this spiritual woo-woo essence to them, but their lives are fucked up. Their finances are fucked, their relationships are in the toilet, they don't have a good business, they don't have a good relationship with their kids. That for all intents and purposes, it's a mask that they put on themselves to be able to promote this spirituality. It's what it is spiritual bypassing. It's just another layer of trauma that they've added to themselves, another layer of personality that they've added to themselves to be able to hold themselves back so that they can appear on the surface that everything's going okay. Don't talk to friends anymore, and don't ask for advice when it comes to friends either, because they don't have the tools, resources, and know-how to be able to apply it to someone else. You have to have time in the trenches. When I first started coaching people and I started going through mental health and hypnosis and all these sorts of things, I had studied modalities, I had studied textbooks and stuff like that to be able to give me insights into what other people have been through and what other people have done to be able to help provide healing and space and clarity and all these sorts of things. I had nothing to refer back to myself except for what I've been through myself. And that's where a lot of people fall into a pitfall. It's like, well, I've gone through this, I'd be able to help other people. Well, yeah, to an extent, but you can only help someone as much as you've gone through yourself. And at the same time, you might find later down the track that things that you've gone through, things that you've experienced were wrong. You might have a whole new epiphany around it that makes it integrate even further and heal even further. You don't know. That's why it's so important to work with someone who can actually help you. And if you can't afford, therapy or anything like that, psychologists, I get it, it's fucking expensive. However, there is always services available for you to talk to someone who is a trained counselor, who is a trained therapist, things like Lifeline, Men's Line, Beyond Blue. There is so many places for you to be heard. And there's 1,000,001 videos on YouTube and podcasts and all these sorts of things that you can narrow down of people handing out amazing content, amazing tips and tricks to be able to start integrating and healing. Hell, on my YouTube channel, on the R.Y.S.E podcast, on the R.Y.S.E Movement podcast YouTube channel, I've got meditations up there to be able to help go through into your subconscious and clear out negative emotions, clear out negative experiences and stuff like that, and start integrating and healing. Jump on those. I'll link them down in the comments. Actually, I'll make it so that you guys can have access to these at the click of a button. All you have to do, headphones on, world off, and start focusing on the words that are coming out of my mouth. That could be a starting step for you. So if you want to get ahead while stop holding yourself back, take your foot off the brake and actually ask for some help. It's not weak to speak. Please reach out to someone who can actually do it though. All right, question number 2. I feel like I've tried everything, nothing works. I haven't seen my kids in 2 years and I'm sad all the time. How do I stop living like this? Okay, number 1, the first thing that we're going to address is your use of language. When it comes to using language like everything and nothing, all or never, these are a language pattern called an infinitive. There is nothing, and I'm using that word deliberately, there is nothing in this world that is infinite. There is nothing that is ever going to be a constant outside of change. When you use words like everything or nothing, these infinitives saying that it is this way or this way, you are creating two poles of the exact same thing. Think of it, up and down, left and right, hot and cold, me versus you. They are measurements of the exact same thing. They are measurements of a polarity, and in between polarity, there is a middle point. The idea behind nothing and everything implies that somewhere in between, there is something. And that's the place that we want to look. So you haven't tried everything. Not everything works. You have tried some things. And in the times of trying these some things, you found a lot of them don't work. That's okay. Many things won't work. This is a really crude analogy, but there's many ways to skin a cat. What worked for me, doing meditation, breath work, plant medicine, therapy, coaching, so on and so forth, might not work for you. You might have to do something really radical. You might have to go to South America to a healing retreat and go do ibogaine. You might have to go sit with the plant iboga. Who knows? That might work for you. But it's not the first place I'd be looking through. When it comes to going on a healing journey, when things aren't working, especially when you haven't seen your kids and the emotional distress that it puts you through, the dysregulation that happens because you haven't seen your kids, because you're a father who wants to be in your kids' lives and you're not a drop dead dad and, a deadbeat father, and you want to do the right thing, but you can't because courts, your ex, whatever's going on. That hurts. That's fucking painful. And all you can fixate on is the pain. Majority of the time, not all the time. You're going to be sad. You're going to be feeling like, why bother? I remember what that was like all those years ago where there was times where my ex cut off contact and I couldn't see my kid. When I couldn't see my oldest daughter, it broke me. It left me so distraught because at that time in my life, I was living to see my daughter. I was living so that I could feel good at the time that I would see my daughter. Because a lot of the time, not all the time, not even majority of the time, I felt like shit. I fucking hated life. Not seeing my daughter broke me. And it was those times where I was trying so desperately to see her, to be around her so that I could feel good again, so I could feel not like a failure again. That's majority of what I was living for. However, you have to stop the language around all or never. There's no such thing as infinitive. The only thing that we know that is a true infinitive is change. The only thing that will ever remain the same is change. So adjust your language there. Moving on to the sad all the time. Again, another infinitive. Being sad all the time is false. You can't hold an emotion for an extended period of time without it becoming taxing on the body. I think we spoke about this last podcast episode talking about Q&A Thursday, but you can't remain happy for longer than 10, maybe 15 seconds. Do it right now. See what happens. Try and hold yourself in sadness for a long period of time. It just doesn't work. Even if you are in the state of depression, even if you are completely depressed, even clinically depressed, there will be moments that you're not sad, that you're not down, that you're not stuck in bed. There'll be moments, there'll be glimmers of hope. That's why I always say, like I've got it tattooed on my arm here, hope for the hopeless, a light in the darkness. There is always hope. And if there is no light around you, look within because you're probably the light. I know what it's like to be run over by the truck. You remember the feather brick and truck analogy? I know what it's like to start from rock bottom. The only thing that you have to keep going a lot of the time is yourself and the hope that one day, especially as a father who doesn't get to see their children, that you get to see your kids again and that they're going to not be indoctrinated by the mother and they're not going to be too fragile or anything like that. All you have is hope that there will be a better day. It's always darkest before the dawn. And a lot of the time, well, actually that saying's false. It's darkest at fucking midnight because it's the middle of the night. But anyway, a lot of the time, all you have is your own hope. And you have to do whatever you can to be able to make sure that that light burns bright. And you have to do things to be able to make sure that you're pouring as much energy and power and gas to be able to fuel that fire so it can propel you forward. Because if you don't have light, what do you have? You got darkness. And darkness is surmountable. Darkness, when you stare at it, it's like, I think it's Nietzsche who says, beware of staring into the void because the void starts staring back. It's a paraphrase, but it's pretty close to that. You've got to be careful of that. Create your own light. Do things that make you feel good and start small. Start small. If you're sad, quote unquote, all the time, start small. What is something that could make you happy if it would? Put on a comedy movie, listen to a podcast that makes you laugh. Put on a stand-up comedian special, put on something that is a default laugh. If I ever feel like I need to feel, wholesome or have some extra hope or anything like that, I'm lucky. I've curated my Instagram feed. I was telling this to my fiance last night. I've curated my Instagram feed so that it shows me jujitsu or it shows me really wholesome shit like, soldiers returning home and, seeing everyone burst into tears and, the gratitude that their son and daughter made at home or like weddings or proposals or, kids being really cute, like that shit fills me full of joy and it spurs me on because I get a little kick of dopamine, yes, from scrolling. However, it makes me feel great. I'm like, yes, there's good things in the world to be grateful for. There's good things to keep pursuing for because that's what means something. We move towards meaning, we move towards purpose, we move towards impact. And me on my mission and helping grow the R.Y.S.E movement so that we can all grow the R.Y.S.E movement together to raise our standards everywhere is that's what it is. It's for these beautiful moments in time. There's going to be plenty of shit. There's going to be plenty of pain. But if we focus on these great things, we can create more of it. And that's what matters. So focus on the little steps, the little 1%ers that are going to allow you to move forward so that you can gain momentum. Because momentum builds momentum. Starting from zero sucks. Starting from zero is damn near impossible. But you can start with these little integers. All you do is that little piece. How do I feel better? How do I do something that makes me feel better? Because it starts with you. No one can make you feel anything except for you. So choose to feel happiness. Choose to do something that makes you feel good. Don't resort to little cheap thrills of, masturbation and porn and, sex and all these sorts of things because that's a pitfall inside of itself. You'll get false gratification there. Do things that make you feel good. Go to the gym, go for a walk, get outside in the sunshine. All of a sudden, we're much like plants. We need sunlight, a bit of water, a bit of food, and all of a sudden we start moving, we start feeling good. You have to force yourself in those moments where you're down in the dumps, you're stuck in bed, you can't get out because you're missing your kids. Times like that, you need to force yourself outside. You need to do something that's going to be hard, that's out in sunlight, that's going to be moving your body so you can get the hormones flowing. That's what I would do. Because I've been there. That's what I did. Okay, final one. I've heard you talk about meditation. How do I stop my thoughts from racing? I've spoken about this on the podcast, so perhaps you missed that episode. But meditation is all about to become familiar with. If your thoughts are racing, imagine it like this. You've got a big highway that you're sitting and observing. The highway is running this way. It's running in front of you, and you're noticing the cars. Each individual car is a thought. So you're not jumping in with the thought and going off on an adventure with it. You're sitting back and observing. That's what we are. We're not the physical body. We're not the mind. We are the thing that observes. When you get to reframe your perspective this way when it comes to meditation, when it comes to all life, that's why when I was talking about that's interesting, did I talk about that on the podcast? Anyway, it's hard when you produce so much freaking content that you don't know where you've put it. But thinking of the observer effect, observing the cars moving past, the thoughts moving past, you're not jumping in with them going off on a journey, you're observing. You get to sit back and go, that's interesting. You're a failure. Oh, where did that come from? Well, I'm not going off on a journey with you. I'm watching you go away. Oh, I need to get bread and milk from the shops. Okay, well, I'm not doing that right now. I'm meditating. I'm sitting and I'm watching that go away. Where do thoughts come from? Who knows? They could come from your epigenetics. They could come from stimulus that you heard, that you smelt. They could come from your thoughts. They could come from your emotions. They could also come from you bumping your elbow and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I did that when I was 5 years old and all of a sudden a thought comes along. You don't know where thoughts come from. So don't journey with them. Watch them. Observe them. And each thought that comes in, breathe. Breathe into softness. The thing with meditation is the best way to start meditating is to have an intention. What am I meditating on? Because there's going to be thoughts that come with that meditation, with that intention. So maybe I'm meditating on what it is to be a good man. What does that mean? I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to meditate upon being a good man. There's going to be tons of thoughts that come in. If I sit in silence for a moment, a thought will come in. The thought that first came up, does it mean that I stand up for others? Does that what it is to be a good man? That's an interesting thought. Do I want to jump in with that and go off on a tangent, go off on a train of thought? Possibly not, but it's interesting that I want to think about that. That's one of the thoughts that comes into my head. So perhaps I could journal it. I could write it down and go, that's interesting. I'm going to write that down. Does that mean standing up for others? Is that what it is to be a good man? And then I return back to the meditation. Close my eyes. What is it to be a good man? I breathe. I soften. It's that same thought again. My mind really wants me to think about, does it mean standing up for others? Interesting. So I'm going to underline that thought and leave it on the journal. Soften again. What does it mean to be a good man? Again, the same thought comes into my head. I don't want to sit in that thought. I'm going to keep watching it go by. So I have something that is a really powerful thought inside right now that my mind wants me to grasp hold of, and it wants me to go off on that journey. I'm not going to. This isn't the time and place for me to be able to think about it and to be able to go through what's underneath that. So I'm going to leave that if I was to meditate right now. That being said, I'm also in high range beta brainwaves. So understanding the brainwaves and where coherency comes inside of ourselves, where we can link mind and body, mind and heart together and create coherence between the two, then we can start getting into presence, we can start getting into relaxation, and we can start actually meditating on the things that we want to. Right now, because I'm caffeinated and because I'm stimulated and because I'm doing something that requires my conscious mind, not my subconscious mind, this is a place where you're not going to be able to meditate too well. You need to calm down. So one thing I would suggest when it comes to learning how to meditate and learning how to remove thoughts, not remove thoughts, but like remove them out of your awareness and not jump in the car with them, is to study what happens when the brainwaves are all incoherent in beta. What happens when you go down into alpha? What happens when you go down into theta? These are the places to be able to learn about so that you can understand where you are currently when it comes to meditating. If you're stimulated through caffeine or pre-workout, or even breath work can do this as well. If you're in high range beta brainwaves, you're not going to meditate too well. So learning about that would be a really great start. I suggest doing the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, hearing about the way that he explains spirituality and mysticism and science and connects the two. It's a really good place to start. And then do your best to stay present. You're not going to be able to do it straight away. I've been meditating since 2012 and I still fuck it up. There's going to be times where you have great meditations where you're euphoric and you've got, the endorphins and everything else is going on. You can see things vividly in your mind. And there's going to be times where you're just bombarded with thoughts. It is what it is. And it can't be anything else than what it is. It just is. So don't hold an outcome to it. Don't hold, it must be like this way with a tight constriction around it. It is what it is. Some days you have great meditations and some days it's going to be hard and you're going to be have to get past yourself. Much like the analogy that I gave before of foot on the brake and foot on the accelerator. There's going to be times like that. Do you know why? You're human. Be gentle with yourself, but hold yourself to high standards. And that's about all we have time for today, guys. Until the next one, much love, take care, and if you need anything, please reach out. Dave at risemovement.com.au. Thanks, guys. Thank you for being with me today. Thank you for subscribing and leaving a review. It really helps us out. Until next time, take care and much love.